Welcome back to the farmhouse. It is the end of August here in Fruitland, Idaho, and we are enjoying this late summer season. The garden is full, the flowers are blooming, and it's hunting season. And we are harvesting so much out of our garden, including butternut squash, which is one of my favorite squash to grow and cook and enjoy throughout the winter. Another thing that we get super cheap here in Fruitland, I don't grow them myself. I do have a peach tree, but it is not producing yet, is peaches. We have Hengler's orchards and a whole bunch of orchards locally that grow and sell peaches. Big, beautiful, juicy, perfect peaches. I got a 20 to 25 pound box for about $16 at Hengler's, which is an orchard who sells their fruit locally. And so I am going to make, of course, peach cobbler, which I showed you on the recipe last week, and I will link that below for you. But I am going to can some of these peaches. I'm canning them in halves, and then I will can a whole bunch just chopped peaches. If you've never canned before and it's something you really want to get into, you should really start with peaches. They are so easy and so delicious. I was talking to some ladies at the local farmers market, and they were so sweet to give me a few pointers on canning peaches, so I'm going to share those with you. It makes it a lot easier. The first tip is just put the sugar straight into your jar and then fill it with water. You'll see the sugar for a little while after it cans, but then it dissolves. This saves you a huge sticky mess of dealing with syrup. The second tip that these mature, wonderful ladies shared with me is that when you are blanching your peaches, you don't need to put them in boiling water and then put them in ice water. You can just use really cold tap water and you don't actually need the ice. So that takes out a huge hassle. My tap water is very cold because it comes out of a well, and so that just removes a huge step. 2 huge steps for me for canning peaches. So for these peaches, I just removed the skin, and you can blanch them and then peel them or just peel them. If you want to use sugar, just put that sugar straight into your jars, then put your peach halves in there, which these peaches were kind of hard because they're so big, so getting peach halves in there was a little bit of a struggle, but totally worth it. And then you fill the jars the rest of the way up with water, clean the rims, put your lids on, screw on the bands, and they're ready to go into your water bath canner. Also, canning peaches is so much easier because you just need a water bath canner, which is essentially just a really big pot. And what you do is you put your peaches in there and then you fill it up so that the water is at least an inch over the top of the jars so that the tops of the jars can heat really well and seal. And then you just bring it to a boil and then boil them for about, I think it was 25 minutes. And when that's done, you remove your jars and they are done. You just let them sit on the counter and you'll hear the lids popping, and that's because they're sealing as they cool. There's nothing quite like homemade canned peaches, so much better than store-bought canned peaches in a metal can. Home jarred peaches are a real treat that you can enjoy throughout the whole winter, depending on how ambitious you are. So I am just taking these peach halves out of the canner, and I am going to put the sliced peaches into the canner. So I've got 2 batches going here. You might think this looks like a ton of peaches, and are you actually going to eat all of those? But actually, yes, peaches go super fast, especially in the wintertime. It's like having fresh fruit in a bottle, and it's just wonderful to have on hand. August in Idaho, everything is coming off in the garden and in the orchard, so there's so much available to preserve and store for winter and for the rest of the year. And actually, peaches will last up to at least 2 years in a jar on the shelf. They'll lose a little bit of color, but it does not change the nutritional value or the flavor of the peaches. They're still just as good the next year. So if you're on the fence about trying canning, definitely recommend trying peaches and starting out with peaches. They're super simple, and you'll be so glad that you have them on hand because you'll really enjoy them. Speaking of things looking pretty around here, I have had this spot that has been bugging me. I hung these plates on the wall and they've been falling off, and I just really don't like how cluttered it looks. So I am cleaning that whole area off. I am going to find a new place for the plates on the wall and a better way to hang them so that they don't fall down. I hung these with the contact strips that you pull, and they're not supposed to take off the paint, but they definitely took the paint off the wall and a little bit of drywall, so I had to touch this wall up. But I got this mirror on Amazon. My style is a vintage farmhouse, so I really love this mirror. If you saw a few videos back, I hung a vintage mirror in my bedroom. This is the living room, and those plates were just a little bit out of place, so I found a better place for them. But I am just enjoying this in this spot. I'm adding a little bit of pre-fall decor with some dried wheat and some dried baby's breath in a vase. And I just think that this looks much more fitting for a living room than it did before. This cabinet is called a pie safe, and essentially you could put your pies and your fresh baked goods in there, and then the screens on them would keep the flies out. I use it as a bookshelf. I have a ton of gardening books and cookbooks, and so it's just a great place for me to keep those. And it also fills a need on this wall. And then I got some actual hardware to hang them with from Amazon and hung them above the kitchen sink, which I think is a much more fitting place for them. I'd like to take a break from this episode to introduce you guys to something that I have just discovered and I am in love with. Pamona's Universal Pectin. I am not selling this, I'm not getting paid for this, but I have always made freezer jam because traditional jams take so much sugar. And I'm talking like 8 cups of sugar for a batch of jam. And that's just way too much sugar for me to feel good about feeding my family. So I always made freezer jam with ultra gel and clear gel, and you can find those recipes all over the blog at farmhouseharvest.net. I've got one for almost every different kind of fruit. And they're great. The only problem is if you're like me, you can run out of room in your freezer. So I was searching for a pectin that I could use, that I could can my jam and put it up on the shelf instead of in the freezer, that didn't use so much sugar. And I am super excited about this. I have made 2 batches with it already. I made a blackberry jam and peach jam. I'm talking about 8 cups of fruit. And you don't even have to use sugar at all. There's 2 packets inside this little box. One is a citrus pectin and one is a calcium powder. The calcium powder, you just mix 2 teaspoons with a half a cup of water, shake that up in a jar. And that calcium water is what activates the pectin and makes it gel. It doesn't need sugar at all. Most of the recipes do call for a little bit of sugar, but I'm talking about like a half a cup of sugar or 1 cup of sugar to 8 cups of fruit. And it's delicious and it gels great. So I'm super excited to start using Pamona's Pectin. I'll be sharing these recipes on the blog at farmhouseharvest.net and traditionandtime.com. I will also link them in the description box below. Okay, so I'm just going to share the process with you for using the Pamona's Pectin. What you need is, the different recipes call for different amounts of fruit, but basically the main recipes call for 4 cups of fruit or 4 cups of mashed fruit. The thing with Pamona's is you can actually double or triple or quadruple the recipe if you want to. It actually works that way, where most jam recipes you can't do that. So I am doubling this recipe, and for peaches you need, it's 4 cups of fruit, so I'm doubling it to 8 cups of mashed fruit. And then all you need to do is peel them if you want. That's not necessary, but I like to peel them. Peel them or chop them or mash them. So it's 4 cups of mashed fruit. I am chopping these, and then I'm going to put them into my pot and simmer them, because you're going to bring it to a boil with the calcium water. And it takes 4 teaspoons of calcium water for each 4 cups. So I am using 8 teaspoons of calcium water. and putting that into my fruit. The pectin you actually mix with the sugar. So for these 8 cups of sugar, I'm only going to use a cup and a half. I'm sorry, for these 8 cups of fruit, I am only going to use a cup and a half of sugar, and then you mix the pectin with the sugar. So since I'm doubling the recipe, I need 6 teaspoons of pectin, mix that in with the sugar, and then the 8 teaspoons of calcium water, and I'm mixing that in with the fruit. Then I'll just put this fruit on the stove, bring it to a simmer, and because some of it is riper than other peaches were, I'm going to use an immersion blender to get that blended down or mashed up. I don't want this jam to be like baby food, so I want to leave it a little bit chunky, so this immersion blender is exactly what I need to get it to the consistency that I want it. You can make it thinner or thicker or bigger chunks or like baby food if you want to. It's just whatever your preference is. So after your fruit comes to a boil, you are going to pour in your sweetener with your pectin in it. If you're using sweetener, you can also use stevia. Each box of Pamona's pectin comes with instructions for using stevia or no sweetener at all, or sugar or honey. I'm using sugar, just a little bit of it though. So after you mix in your sugar with your fruit, you whisk it in and bring it back to a boil so that all of the pectin dissolves. Now remember the calcium water I already put in when I put the fruit in. So now that calcium water is going to activate this citrus pectin as it comes to a boil. And this type of pectin does not cool or thicken. It doesn't thicken until it cools, which makes it safe for canning. And it also makes it very convenient because I am going to pour this hot jam into my hot, clean jars that I just pulled out of the dishwasher. So I've got hot jars, hot jam, and I have the water bath canner heating up on the stove, so that'll have hot water in it too. And this is just super easy. I actually ate leftovers from this pot after I filled all my jars, and it was so delicious with just a little bit of sweetener. Perfect. So for these jams and jellies, you fill your pint-sized jars to 1/4 of an inch headspace, which is not very much headspace. That's all it needs for it to seal in the jars. So just like any canning process, after you fill all of your jars, you're going to take a clean washcloth. I use a little bit of vinegar. You can also just use water, and you're going to wipe each of the rims clean and make sure that you get off any pieces of juice or jelly that might have gotten on there while you were filling the jars. And this is really important just to make sure that your lids seal onto the glass instead of getting jam and things in there that would cause the seal to fail. After washing each of those jars, you're going to place your lids on top and screw them to finger tight with the bands, and then you are going to load them into your water bath canner. Now, if I was to try to load these hot jars into cold water, the glass would break. But because these jars are hot and the jam inside it is hot, I can preheat my water bath canner and then put my hot jars into my hot water bath canner. And that just makes a lot less processing times because you don't have to wait for the water in your water bath canner to heat up. You've got to bring it to a rolling boil, and then once it's at a rolling boil, you set your timer. I'm at 2,500 feet altitude, so I'm setting my timer for 14 minutes. But the recipe calls for 10 minutes and then an extra minute for every 1,000 feet you're above sea level. And that's it. So it's a very short processing time, a very easy recipe to follow. And then when you're done, you have this beautiful jam that is mostly just fruit with a little bit of sugar and is completely so much healthier for you. And I feel so much better about preserving this for my family and serving it to them throughout the winter with only 1.5 cups of sugar, and it ended up making 7 pint jars of peach jam. I forgot to mention that with the peaches, you also do add lemon juice. So I didn't get that on camera, but I did add lemon juice to the boiling fruit. You can also use honey instead of sugar, but I didn't want to compromise the flavor of the peaches, so I used sugar. And these are gorgeous. They would make such a great Christmas present too. That's if we have any left, because we are going to enjoy these very much. As always, thank you so much for watching my video. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and we'll see you next time.